you know.
Well, good for you. I, on the other hand, on the West Coast, have just recently woken up. So you're way ahead of the game. Been
Well, I
much more
feel like
productive than
I
me.
feel like after this, I'm gonna crash and burn for like 4 hours
Well, fair
nap
enough.
time.
Well, all right. Well, we got some things to talk about today.
We do new and
Let's,
different things, and some
yeah.
not new and different things, and I'm sort of excited.
Well, why don't you kick us off,
Okay,
Jeremy?
I don't know if I can explain what this is really, except that we've talked about it a lot over the course of our many episodes now, which is that someone, a public figure, gets themselves into trouble because I don't know, because they're an asshole, because maybe cover your ears if you're in the car with children. Maybe they masturbate into plants. Maybe they're transphobic
Or in front of
or
people
in front of people or over the phone.
without their permission.
Um, or maybe they're transphobic, or maybe they're generally toxic. Maybe they find out that they're, or we find out that they're a raging racist. Whatever those things are, right? You're a public figure, and you run afoul of, say, normal human decency on some level. And so my questions are: I just want to talk about some of those. We can recap some of the ones we've talked about on the podcast so far, and I just want to sort of like see what the response should be. I think we could talk through both the response of that person. Let's say you're not that person, but maybe you find yourself in similar shoes potentially, or you're afraid you will. And what's your response as that public figure? What is your responsibility? And two, what is our responsibility as people who consume that thing?
The thing that they do. I mean, yeah, that's an interesting question. And beyond just individuals, I think you could broaden that discussion out to institutions or corporations
Sure.
as well. Uh, you know, um, you sort of touched on qualities and situations with a number of specific people that we'll get into, I'm sure. But this is also reminiscent of the discussion we just recently had about the company Chick-fil-A
Mm.
and, how one should approach them or not approach them at all in response to, their various things. But yeah, let's um, get into it. You when you were proposing this idea to talk about, you couched it in J.K. Rowling
Sure.
as the sort of as the figure. There are a range of different things I think that we should, um, be clear about that we're discussing here. Some of which, you know, go to like rape. You know what I mean? Like actual, straight up rape, and run the gamut from that to holding positions or beliefs or ideas that are problematic in some way. So we should make it clear that we're talking about a range here, but the response to them in some way is this implication that we are to have a response,
Mm.
and that their place in the sort of public, and the privilege and power and fame and love that comes with that is called into question. And so Rowling's an interesting case of that because she is with us very prominently. And just to be clear, what is the reason that she is under question, Jeremy?
Well, she is a turf. We call them trans exclusionary radical feminist, which is
Trans exclusionary radical feminist.
yes, which
Turf.
which um so the very boiled down version of it is that it is a kind of denial to um, persons who identify as female but were born male, and who have transitioned or in the process of transitioning or thinking about transitioning, and whether they get counted as in this sort of as women, and in the sort of political equation that follows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's what has made her controversial in the last, I'd say, maybe 5 years, since this has become since people became aware on any level that this is a thing that she has opinions about. But really has ramped up in the last 2 years, probably, as an issue that she repeatedly sort of, has just invoked and shown herself to be very passionately sort of opinionated about. Um, and there's this question of, what's the appropriate response to this? All in the background, and it's a particularly fascinating case. I mean, this touches on the idea of cancel culture broadly, which we've actually addressed to some degree in our discussions here before, but it's bigger than that. What are you supposed, okay, so one of the things that we want to talk about is what's the appropriate response when you find yourself in a position of being questioned. She has her situation is different from everybody else's. It's odd to have her in the same conversation as Louis C.K., for instance, or Harvey Weinstein or something like that, because she's such a huge pop cultural figure and her work. I mean, you lop off some of these people, you're talking about sort of shutting down a small corner of the entertainment world if we're to reject them, but and the cultural world. But J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter is a behemoth, and it's as popular now as it ever has been, arguably more so in some respects, which makes her particularly an interesting case, because I can't, and it must be said, the things that for which she is condemned are not illegal, right? And that's a distinction to be made here when we talk about someone like Louis C.K. or Kevin Spacey or somebody. They engaged in, or allegedly engaged in, illegal acts, right? And so that's a whole thing too. So sort of in the face of knowing that she is as popular now as maybe she's ever been, continues to gain wealth, but then also invokes this argument herself. It's not as if she got drawn into it accidentally and then she made the choice to do this.
Well, and it's her case is pretty interesting to me too, because I mean, she can afford to have these positions on one level. Literally afford to have the positions. She's a
billionaire.
Yeah,
she is literally a billionaire.
Does not have anything much to lose except sort of legacy issues. And I think even the as marketing calculus only, she's got a lot to lose, and this is a relatively small amount when you talk about angry trans people and their allies. It's a relatively small segment of the population, and I don't know if that's part of her calculation or not. But I would imagine if something cost her more, she might not have as a defensive response, right? She might not. She might not be. I don't know that. I do know that she has a background, a personal background that informs her perspective
position
considerably. It's her personal story. It has to do with her failed relationship and um, things of that nature. And so she can afford to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, my question is, um, let's say let's say you're J.K. Rowling. Let's say you're I don't know, a member of Trump world. Let's say it's these groups of people or these individuals who are not engaged in the Harvey Weinsteins, right? But or the Kevin Spaceys, but who are some degree less than that, right? In the other cases, society has decided that there is some behavior we're not okay with that will get you put into a prison cell or get you sued uh, uh, at a high cost, right? The society has decided that those are unacceptable. And so that is kind of the collective societal response, right? And there's a sort of side question with some of those about whether you ought to continue to consume the things that those people made. That's the Cosby question, right?
Well, but that's the question. That's the question for all of us in all of these cases, right? Should we continue to consume their stuff?
Yeah, and so if we move to the more the I don't want to say milder, but let's move to these other things that are not necessarily criminal, right? Where there isn't an agreed upon societal response. What is our responsibility? I think on both ends of that. If you're the public figure or if you're the consumer. And I ask the question because there is discomfort around the sort of Twitter mob mentality. And there's discomfort, I think less discomfort around boycotts. I mean, those have been around. I mean, the person on the receiving end of the boycott is uncomfortable, but everybody else can be. I mean, those have been around forever. But I'm sort of, I guess I'm wondering what the moral thing to do here is.
Yeah, it occurs to me that this is really the salient question, and the only way to really tie all of these situations together, as we have made reference to them, there's no easy way to put them all under an umbrella or to even approach the question of what is the artist or the person or the corporation's responsibility for dealing with these situations, because each one's so individual. But the question that we face in all of these situations is, when is it important for us to say reject their work? Is that the appropriate thing to do? And if it is, where do you draw the line as to when you do that or you don't? That is a individual consideration to some degree, but because Rowling's an interesting case, right? There are people who agree with her in the world. There are people who don't care about what she's talking about, and have no and can't find it within themselves to be moved by the issue, I think. And then maybe there are people who have like a considered position, which is like, I don't boycott things. Who has been, honest to goodness, canceled?
I think it's fair to say Kevin Spacey, Bill Cosby.
Kevin Spacey and Bill Cosby strike me as the only people whose work has actually been memory hold.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Bill Cosby to a greater degree than Spacey, I think. Like, you just, the Cosby Show, which played in syndication constantly since the early 80s, has just disappeared as a cultural artifact. Right? It no longer exists. Bill Cosby's stand-up, which was regarded as among the very best of the form. His albums remained consistently in print and available. They are gone now. And it is essentially verboten to you know, invoke them in a positive way in polite society. Nobody does it. Uh, so it would see, and that's a pretty uniform response from like the culture at large. Cosby has his defenders certainly, but his work has been disappeared. Kevin Spacey, to a lesser extent, this is true, but you know, because he's in so many big movies with other people, you still, you know, he still shows up on your TV periodically in a way that Bill Cosby just doesn't, right? Um, but you know, their legacies have been tremendously curtailed, and so it seems like there is this like general consensus. It's like, well, if you rape a bunch of people, as in Bill Cosby's case, or underage people, you know, as in the case, or any people, if you rape people, then we're done with you, right?
Mm.
It seems like everyone's comfortable saying that. And then after that, things get real squidgy, right?
Yep. And it's like this. Well, do I enjoy it enough? Did I like the work? You know? And it comes down to it goes back to the Chick-fil-A question, right? It's a good sandwich. People keep eating it. And some people don't, as you say, are not bothered by the politics of it, right? And the same thing is true in there.
Or active partisans on the other side. I mean, that's the thing. Nobody's an active partisan for rape, sure. Right? I mean, in any in any numbers that matter. But you know, when these things become sort of embedded in political questions, I think the debate becomes an active debate, and it suddenly becomes more complicated. You know, a person on this spectrum that is interesting on this continuum is Louis C.K., who for whom arguments are made. Do you know what I mean? It's like nobody's out there defending the actions of Bill Cosby or Kevin Spacey, except to the extent that they say they didn't happen, right? But no one's out there on the merits, you know, arguing on their behalf. People are doing that for other people who we've discussed here, including Louis C.K., Dave Chappelle, who we've spoken about multiple times in this show, has been a vocal critic of Louis C.K.'s accusers, and has also invited him to perform at his stand-up shows that he's been doing over the last few months during COVID. And there are other people who take this, like, you know, actively defensive position of him. And Louis C.K., while his career has been curtailed tremendously, continues to work. You know, he tours across the country. He's lost his like national television platform, and the movie that he made is never going to be distributed, or at least won't be for a while. And so he's lost a lot of money, but he still continues to be, you know, by any reasonable measure, a wealthy man who is famous and has fans, produces work and continues to put it out there. And so what is, stepping aside from these questions of each individual person, I'm really interested in the larger question, the abstract question of do we have a responsibility to boycott if we disagree morally with something? What do you think?
That is the question I asked, I think, the foundational question, and
right, and I didn't answer.
And I don't have an answer for it. Something about it, something makes me very comfortable, right? So I'm going to use another specific example, but like you're talking about corporations. I mean, the um, like the kind of vehicle you buy or the kind of retailer where you shop are important questions to me. And actually, I think they're probably more foundational in terms of causing other human suffering than the question of a boycott. So I could see like an individual celebrity in terms of human suffering, whether or not I turn off J.K. Rowling's content, Louis C.K.'s content, the human suffering there is small. My choice is small. Even if there are 100,000 or 1,000,000 or 100 million of me, the human suffering of making that decision is small. I tend to focus my consternation on the.
Well, wait. Let's hold on. Just to clarify what you're saying, it's not that their positions don't cause people to suffer, but you're saying that your individual action will not impact the human suffering to some great
I
degree.
think
Or
that may
another.
be a version of what I'm saying. Yeah. Whereas I think, for instance, the act of driving an SUV when you don't need to, when you could just drive a car, or the act of, say, shopping at a big box retailer when you could do something else that doesn't employ like third world labor. I think those individual decisions and the collective boycott have, say, more impact. The not shopping in Amazon, more impact. And I'm not necessarily concerned about the more or the less here, because like you have a small group of people who are suffering, trans people in the J.K. Rowling case, and a large group of suffering. And I'm not like trying to compare suffering of different groups of people. What I am saying is that it's curious to me about what we get upset about and what we think requires a response, and
what we don't.
Right, and settling on, say, the social issues, the sexual social issues in these cases, in all of these cases, settling on that as the thing we're going to get upset about loudly. That's the cancel culture. That's the Twitter mob. That's the thing that, and I think on an individual level does require a response, and a social level does require a response. But the things that while we are making noise about that, we are not also making noise about the exploitation that's a little bit more sewn into our lives that we are actually maybe complicit in committing is an interesting thing. And there are lots of reasons, right? Like we're going to defend those things because we participate in them more. And it's easy to look at a TERF or a rapist or a manipulator or a pedophile or whatever and say that's them. But in terms of damage, human damage, I'm interested like that we don't engage in some of that other stuff.
Damage on a large scale.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot to unpack there. This is tricky to talk about.
And one thing I just want to say is like I don't think it's an either or thing. I don't.
No, I don't either. I agree.
It's but what I guess I see is that we react to this mostly sexual stuff because that's kind of how particularly in the United States, the sort of culture is to be sensitive about the sexual stuff and to leave the sort of exploitative stuff that maybe just has more of a capitalist bent or something mostly alone, because that's how the machine works, right?
Well, it's not just sexual though. Over the last year, racial politics has definitely become a big part of this as well, and having specific positions on that. One of the more interesting to me examples of the weird cognitive dissonance that you referred to there is, in the realm of professional sports, Black Lives Matter protests have, been undertaken in uh, all these different sports, in baseball, football, basketball, to some degree or another. Basketball in a very you know high profile way in many cases, and so it was interesting when in the midst, really in the middle of that happening, and they've been very controversial, and there are arguments that viewership numbers have gone down because of those protests. Uh, though that some of that is inconclusive, but while that was happening, uh, China started. Some players, I can't remember the exact details, but there was a question of criticizing China's activities with regard to Hong Kong
Mm-hmm.
over the last year, and one of the coaches, I want to say Houston, but again, I could be wrong about that. Yeah. In Houston, made comments to the effect of, well, that's not what we stand for in America, and we're for freedom. And the league came down hard on him for that, and China was mad, and he had to sort of walk it back. And a whole bunch of players who were very active in the Black Lives Matter protests, even came out and said, China's China, they can do what they want. Reason being, there's billions and billions of dollars to be made in China. And human rights abuses on a scale, I mean, not to say that any individual suffering is necessarily more important than another person's suffering, but just in terms of the numbers, like the people whose lives are affected by Chinese human rights abuses are massive, right? And the implications of that are very, very far-reaching. At least as much as these other issues for which upon which stands are being taken, and there's a hypocrisy there, and that hypocrisy, I mean, you get at it with what you were just talking about. It's like that can be dispiriting, and it can be weird, right? It's like right now I'm using Apple products to record this podcast while we're talking about it. So, if there was a place I was boycotting, somebody could turn around and say, well, you use Apple products,
Mm-hmm.
which, famously incorporate tremendous human rights abuses in their manufacture.
And this is so you've actually circled right back to the thing that I think is the question that I want to ask, which is, what are we doing pointing fingers at any time for any reason about anything? And I'm asking that sort of with the tongue in my cheek to some degree, but not entirely, which is most of what I experience as in the go back to Rowling and the celebrity crowd is a sort of like guilt purgation, self-righteousness performance that's in public usually. It might involve a group of people, or it might just involve somebody in a microphone or a Twitter account or whatever. But like, what are we doing? I mean, like, the point of a boycott, to go back to that question, is yes, I'm in favor of them, but I don't think that's the end. The end, right, is to get everybody around a table and to equalize the imbalances, to create justice, right? That's the point of a boycott. It's to, like, command attention. That's the point of a riot. That's the point of an NBA coach speaking up, is to sort of command attention and, like, correct the imbalances, right? And so part of my, like, I think on an individual consumer level, there are inescapable things. If you drive in the economy and you're outside a city, you want to participate in the economy, you got to have a car, you got to consume gas, right? So there is some guilt involved in just being associated in the society. Yeah. But there are some things you can do on a sort of personal home ec level that sort of maybe can correct for some of that. And I think that's true in a lot of the examples we're talking about, retail or whatever, um, where. But I suppose the just thing in some of these other cases is to sort of make those adjustments as well. I don't know. That doesn't seem full enough to me, full enough of a response. Like, my daughter is a huge Harry Potter fan. She watches it all the time. She reads the books all the time. We have had the conversation about J.K. Rowling, um, but like that's it. We've just talked about the issue. We're still consumers. We haven't turned that off in any way, and I don't know if that's the right answer.
I don't know if it is either. I mean, it becomes more complicated. Like, too, if you decide to start invoking the personal lives and behaviors of artists throughout history, if you're to remove all of them who, had scurrilous or unpleasant or even evil um, opinions, you're going to end up with a pretty short list of people who you're
Well,
allowed
and
to
okay, so this brings me back to
consume.
I'm wearing my Sweet Tea Shakespeare. I'm an artistic director for a Shakespeare company hat because I do see an overlap between everything we've been discussing so far and say the content of Shakespeare, which I don't know anything about Shakespeare the person. I don't know if he was a racist, a sexist, whatever. I have no clue. But I do know his content is that. It's all of those things in some way. I know his content does that. And I'm like, right, I'm sophisticated enough to know that, like, just because he's showing a murder on stage does not mean he condones murder. And just because he's showing something else on stage doesn't mean he condones that. I get that. But setting the content aside for just a second and like seeing what Shakespeare has represented as a cultural entity, a colonial presence, a the paint with which things are whitewashed for now a small few hundred years. My question becomes, all right, so like it's one thing if my daughter still reads Harry Potter. It's another thing like to run a company that's basically inextricably linked to, say, colonialism, right? And so
Well,
that's where I'm like coming down. Is the right answer? I'm not saying I'm going to do this, listeners. I'm just asking the question. Does it mean the best thing to do is not run a Shakespeare company anymore? Does it mean the thing to do is not consume Harry Potter anymore, personally? Does it require a bigger collective response? Those are the questions I'm asking.
in order to be moral, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you need to get rid of cars completely and start riding bikes everywhere? Do you need to? But oh boy, I mean, part of what makes the Rowling situation, going back to that again, complicated is that she had already become, culturally dominant and ubiquitous before this stuff started coming to light, and people had enshrined her work as representative of a certain set of values that her opinions about trans issues would seem to be in conflict with, right? Um, she would say that that's not true. A lot of other people who agree with her, I suppose, would probably say the same thing. But you can see, um, how it would be. And in fact, what's interesting is that a lot of her collaborators on Harry Potter projects over the years have come down very hard on the opposite side of her and see, their participation in the franchise that she created as, you know, upholding values that are in conflict with hers. And this touches on the Shakespeare question as well. There are retrograde values expressed in Shakespeare's work, but you can also find counterbalancing things in the other direction. Just to say, when it comes to art, when it becomes so big that it's unavoidable, which I think Harry Potter is in our moment, uh, perhaps the opinions of the artist don't matter so much, and that the work become separate from them, which it surely will. Like in after J.K. Rowling has died, Harry Potter could fade away, and it could no longer be a part of society. It's hard to say if it's going to be a long-term sort of addition to the Western canon, as it were. But if it does stick around, and if in 60 years people are still reading Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling's opinions on social issues are not going to be remembered. And the work is going to have to speak for itself. Part of the reason that I think Shakespeare's work has stuck around for as long as it has, and will, I believe, continue to stick around in spite of, the problematic aspects of his work, is that it is complex enough, it is, on a moral and intellectual level, and robust enough to, within itself, offer countervailing examples or arguments against its problematic aspects, right? I mean,
well, and you've sort of hit on a difference maker for me, and I don't know if it's the difference maker, but part of the answer for me to this question, I think, is: are you aware of your evil? And like, you may not be able to escape it. It may be inevitable, but are you aware of it? And does it affect your working in the world? And I don't know the answer for Bill Cosby. I don't know the answer for Kevin Spacey. I don't know the answer for Harvey Weinstein. I think some of them might be sorry for being caught more than being sorry. I don't know the answer. But
some of them maintain that all of them maintain they didn't. Those three people maintain they didn't do anything wrong.
Sure.
Full stop.
I mean, to me, part of the answer is that you may have the legacy of evil, whatever, or problem, right? But if you're aware of it and are like somewhat, even like a tiny bit, acting off of that awareness, it's not like you're home free, but like it is a start, right? Like,
you mean acting against it or trying to diminish it in its influence in your life? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's those things, and also like, does that awareness get you to the table with the people who have a problem with you?
Well, you know what? I have another way of approaching that question, or a different way of thinking about it, which is to say, should we believe that people who have evil within them, that's all there is there? I think that's my gut instinct as an answer to your question is that most people probably aren't aware of their own evil, or that it's so compartmentalized that it that to the extent that they are aware of it, it also doesn't really enter into their other calculations, which is to say, I don't know. I don't know that it's an active concern that is affecting the rest of their behavior in such a conscious way. And I think it's important to recognize that in art, particularly, people are not just one thing, right? That people who do tremendously hurtful and bad things, who have bad opinions on a range of different subjects, are also capable of creating art and upholding values that are beautiful and good. And and that part of the human condition and the human experience is that flawed people have within them the ability to do good and beautiful things. And artists in particular, who are flawed in all sorts of ways, can also have an insight or a genius for finding something beautiful and good, and burnishing it, bringing it forward, in a way that other people can't. And maybe this is where it gets real naughty and controversial. Look, artists are messed up people, like in general. They are. Um, People who like are morally uncomplicated and just good. Uh, they don't. I don't know that they'd be capable of making good art. There are, I'm sure, people who are, but in my experience, artists are people who you know, in fact, often have done very, very bad things or hold positions that are really not laudable, who are screwed up in ways that are fundamental. And this isn't true of everybody. Okay, I know that it's not, even as I'm saying it, but it is true of many people, right? And sometimes the understanding of their own darkness or the you know or their own positions like inform the way their attraction to good, and sometimes they're not conscious of that, right? you know Again, going back to Rowling just as an example, she roots her positions on trans issues in morality, in her own personal morality, as you said. um uh but so I don't think she doesn't, I know for a fact, she doesn't think of her position on this as evil, right? But I bet you there is some part of, she's an intelligent woman, in spite of how stupid some of the ways, I mean, I don't know, like her purposeful willingness to like jump into this debate when she never had to, does speak to a certain kind of blindness. But what I am sure that she is aware of, though, is the sort of knotty contradictions at the heart of her situation. Do you know what I mean? Which I'm sure informs her artistic work in some way or another, or her plans, right? Uh, the idea of two different groups of people having, diametric opposition that is rooted in their own belief in their moral position is, she is an intelligent enough person to grasp that conflict, and probably could, on the basis of, her previous work, create interesting art that has that at the center of it, right? And might be able to step outside of herself to articulate the position of a person who disagreed with her. Maybe not, but that's something that a person who had, you know, inappropriate or bad or problematic positions, but who also was an interesting and smart artist, could use to some effect. And so in that way, you know, the problematic aspects of themselves could fuel interesting, productive art. Um, I don't really know where I'm going with that, but all this is to say that the work itself, I don't know that it's wrong to separate that from the person to the extent that it's meaningful. I mean, on the other hand, I wouldn't begrudge anybody from saying I never want to read another J.K. Rowling thing again.
Yeah, me either.
Right?
I mean, yeah, part of what you're saying. I mean, to go back to the boycott question and some of that the council culture thing. I mean, it's like if people are acting one dimensionally, as in like with the whatever that is, the problematic, the evil quality, then I think a one dimensional response makes perfect sense. It's totally just. It's the right thing to do. But to your point about the human beings and the artists who have more dimension to them, I think it's fair to respond in more than one dimension. Does that make sense? So like I can, when I'm thinking about Rowling, I can think about her work. I think about the stuff that I don't like. When I'm thinking about Chick-fil-A, I can think about their politics, which I'm not a huge fan of, and I think about their sandwiches really good, and it makes me a hypocrite kind of to be dealing with that, but it's also who I am. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, it does. I have two separate thoughts about this, actually. First, we talk about cancel culture, and it sounds like maybe condemning people's responses to these people as being performative, um, which is to suggest not sincere. I think that this exists on a continuum, and some people that is more the case than with others. Um, but that for many people, you know, their responses to this are to these issues, be it Chick-fil-A, be it J.K. Rowling, um, be it China and the NBA. Their personal responses to this stuff are are sincere and are rooted in their own life experience. And the feeling that a trans person has when reacting to J.K. Rowling's work, and the hurt that they feel, and the sense of despair that comes from feeling betrayed by somebody who you loved and whose work was meaningful to you. Uh, that's all honest. And to make the decision, I don't want to engage with that anymore because this hurts me and it threatens my life in some fundamental way. Many of them, I mean, many of them believe that sincerely, right?
Mm.
Um, and so their decision to boycott is not rooted in trying to get likes on Twitter. It's an honest response, right? Um, and then there are people who maybe are just trying to get likes on Twitter, but these things exist within people, like the conflict of between like how much am I performing you know my rejection of a person or an idea, and how much is it a sincere reaction. That may not always be super cut and dried, right?
Oh, and
And people
I
may
think there are
burn to excess.
probably the majority of people don't know the difference.
Well, or they exist in conversation with each other within a person,
Mm.
which is to say, my response to this, my response and my decision to reject a person's work is sincerely held for reasons that I believe are moral and right. Um, but then at the same time, like the extent to which they you know respond to other people about that, there could other more superficial questions and maybe less sensitive responses on their part to other people who don't share their perspective might be rooted in something else too. These aren't easy questions to answer, I guess, is my point. And it's also not easy to say, like, this comes up in politics a lot, in political discussions I've had recently with strangers on social media, which is a terrible thing to do. Don't do it. Um, but a lot of times it comes down to, it's like you're virtue signaling, and you're just doing this to show people that you think you're better than other people and you're better than me. And it's like, no, I believe what I'm saying is true. I don't care what other people's response is. And I think that when we get into ideological arguments like this, it's very easy for the other person just to see their opponent as mouthing talking points that on some level we believe they know aren't legitimate, and that they're just trying to win the argument, when in fact they may actually be expressing the true opinions of their heart. Do you know what I mean? Very hard to drill into other people's responses. Now that's thought number one. Thought number two is this: like the question. I think the question of like, there's this internet meme, which you may have seen. It's a comic panel, and the essence of it is, you know, I don't remember the exact, so this is not going to come out well. The It's like this person complaining about like, it's like it is wrong to do this thing. I think it's a person like carrying a bundle of sticks on their back, and like the person saying like, maybe I think it would be a good idea for us to not use gas so much, or to try and take care of, to take some particular action. And then there's this other person who's like leaning in with a big sort of nasty smile on their face, saying, "And yet you participate in society." So you're being contradictory. It's like people can have. So okay, that was a terrible illustration because it's like half remembered. But the point is this: it's like it's making fun of the phenomenon, or it's pointing out the phenomenon of people having sincerely held desires to counteract what they see as evil behavior or actions. Saying, I think maybe we should try and do more for the environment. And then somebody sticking in and said, well, you own a car, so shut up. Right? Is the essence. And that's not a reasonable response. The truth is that modernity implicates all of us, especially in America, in all sorts of ways. That, yeah, sure, make us hypocrites to some degree. And, we can either have the response of, I'm not going to do anything then. What's the point? Throw up your hands. Nothing matters. Or simply to say, yes, that's true, and it is problematic, and yet that doesn't mean that I should do nothing about the specific issue of evil as I understand it that's sitting in front of me, right? It's like, nevertheless, I will, in spite of my own personal hypocrisy, which I recognize as an adult person, or my complicity in systems that are bad, I will not allow that to stop me from trying to, make the world better in this small way, in this situation where I can. And there's this constant, there will be a constant argument against you that it's like, well, the thing you're doing that you think is good is actually just performative, even if you hold it sincerely. It's like the argument that people on environmental issues often make is, it's like, whatever you're doing as an individual, changing out your particular light bulbs and like using that toilet paper that is supposed to be better for the world, but is, actively unpleasant to use. And, that scratches your butt and leaves you feeling uncomfortable as you walk around after that, in fact, your decision to make those decisions and make those like choices as a consumer, all of them are negligible and essentially meaningless. And all you're doing there is assuaging some personal, some personal guilt, but it's all to no effect. And even if you sincerely believe that what you're doing is the right thing to do, it doesn't mean anything, which means that you're a sucker, or it does mean that you're just a prig. And it's like, join the rest of us here in the muck, dummy, is the idea. Even if that were all true, I don't know that it's wrong to model the behavior that you think, that you wish that other people would have. Even if it's true that, like, using that particular kind of light bulb isn't great, or choosing to buy a Prius isn't really going to matter. You could buy, a gas guzzling truck. But and then on some level, it's like, the counter response to that is, on some level, that's not true. If we all stopped buying trucks, then the auto industry would change. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And which is to say that, like, the truth is not cut and dried on either side. And ultimately, I come down on the place that it's like, if you feel like you need to take a moral stand on something, go ahead and take it if it's sincere. There's nothing wrong with, like, with following your convictions. If even if it is just within yourself, you know what I mean? It's like, said, it doesn't matter if you don't buy another J.K. Rowling book. She's going to be a billionaire forever. And it's like, be that as it may, I don't feel comfortable doing it. It makes me feel bad. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, and I would prefer not to do that and support a thing that I don't like. And I can respect that, is my answer, I guess, to this question. End monologue.
No, that's good.
And scene.
Yeah, I'm still um not sure where I am. And I don't think I'm ever going to be, and that's part of the point. But the to me, I think what I look for that I don't see as frequently as I'd like, both within myself and within the examples provided to me, or in the larger societal conversation, is like the humility on the offender and on the part of the offended to like be human for a second. And that's where it's just bulldozers going at each other all the time, and they can be sincerely driven bulldozers. But even this is, I don't know, this is going to take us down a whole other road. But like, sincerity is part of the puzzle for me, but it is not the complete part of the puzzle. It doesn't completely satisfy what I'm after. Like, sincerity is not the same as like truth, and so it's like we're still at each other, and I would think so. I guess part of what I'm saying, not very clearly, is that part of the part of the failure that we have right now is that even if you're wrong, even if you're the offended party, and I mean that from you could be it could be offended because you're performatively offended, or it could be offended because you're the actual victim. In either case, I think the ask is to like breathe, step back, and deal with the other being like they're a human being for as long as you can.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that that's how you square the circle that you're talking about there. It's like people are going to be motivated by their convictions to, fight against whatever injustice that they might see. But I think that the way that you can avoid becoming a monster, for lack of a better way of saying this, in terms of how you deal with this, is that you do your best to treat each individual person as a person, as opposed to an avatar for their
Mm.
position or argument. And some people will, you know, turn out to be malicious and ugly and mean and combative and terrible, regardless of what you do, in which case, you know, so be it. But in my experience, I have found that the more you attempt to actually engage with a person on a human level, um, the more productive those discussions can become. And that this is my general predisposition. And I say this knowing that because it's my general predisposition, I might be wrong, you know, um, because how lucky would I be if the thing that I happen to be inclined to happens to be the right thing, right? What an amazing coincidence that I was right, you know? So I might be wrong, but my general impulse in life is to, even when I disagree with somebody, take down the temperature in a conversation with them and try to engage with them in a human way and find common ground. Now, I recognize that this is not a mode of behavior and an approach to things that is very popular at this moment in our culture. and that people who are righteously engaged in causes really find my inclination and my approach to this thing to be pernicious, right? That the attempt to approach people as humans and to find common ground and to find compromise, or to try and understand what they're doing in the hopes of finding a resolution, is the way that we don't get change fast enough, and that people continue to suffer, and that a more combative and righteous approach is in fact what is called for, and people like me should have their heads lopped off, or be shoved into cannons and shot out over the world because I am a squishy, moderate uh, white person of a certain age who should be ground up into dog meat. I get it. I'm that guy. And I am advancing that argument. But it's a learned argument that I again, coming back to your question of sincerity versus being right, I sincerely believe that it's the best way to interact with people based on my own personal experience in life. It's like, I honestly, in my day-to-day life, haven't seen a lot of productive things come out of like just punching. Do you know what I mean? And so, and in fact, I have had more luck changing people's opinions and influencing them towards my opinion. Than being overtly aggressive. That doesn't yield great results in my experience, in my personal experience. And so back to this thing we're talking about. I understand fighting hard against things that you think are wrong, but then when confronted with an individual, you have to work to remember this is a person, and that their opinions are rooted in actual behavior and actual experience, their lived experience. And trying to unpack that and discuss that with them, to my mind, is going to help your cause more in the end than simply fighting against them as if, as I said before, they're an avatar for the position that you dislike. And, on an individual level, when dealing with the sort of, implications of what we're talking about, I think that that's how that should work. Approach each person as if they're a person. So I agree with you.
Well, we're going to switch gears a little bit and commit some capitalist crimes, I think. And so, first of all, listeners, thank you for hanging with us. That was sort of heavy. We're going to go to something light, and we're also going to become the very hypocrites we were talking about, because we're going to talk about products we like, things we like.
Yay!
And so I just want to say out there, if depending on when you're listening to this, if you're listening to the live stream, the holidays are still ahead of us. If you're listening on the podcast, they may be well after. In which case, take all of the stuff that you got at Christmas, turn it back in, and use your Visa gift card to purchase these things. These are some things that Rob and I like. And so we're just going to recommend them. We're just going to celebrate them a little bit.
Yeah, making recommendations for things that we enjoy. We'll just go back and forth on this, maybe. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Jeremy, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So I, not everybody knows this. This is sort of a new hobby for me, but I've taken up the occasional smoking of a pipe. I find it meditative and weird and olfactory fun. So I am recommending a pipe, a brand of pipes actually, made in Czechia. They're called Seawolf pipes. We will, by the way, link to all these in the show notes. But Seawolf Pipes makes a beautiful series of pipes. They put out they're all handmade. They put them out every so often, and it's usually a limited run. And I just ordered. I don't have my hands on it yet because, COVID times means I'll get it in like 3 months. But I just got myself the Seawolf pipe of the year. They're total of 15 numbered pipes ever made in the universe by this guy, Seawolf. And I'm getting a sandblasted one. And I just put my little, tobacco's in it from the local tobacco store and pipe away. It's good. And I recommend you order from them. No pipe is the same. They're all custom, and I love it.
That sounds great. So the first thing that I'll be recommending today is the Slim Fold wallet, specifically their Tyvek wallet. I used to be a person who had wallets that were huge, like big wallets that I just stuck things into and had millions of cards, and everybody who ever saw them made fun of me because of how big they were. And somebody in response to as a gift once gave me a Slim Fold wallet as a way of being like, here, get a different wallet, dum dum. And Tyvek is, if you don't know, that material that like the paper that mailing like USPS mailing envelopes are made out of that you can't tear easily, that holds up super well, and that has some fibrous sort of quality to it, and they make wallets out of this stuff, and it's amazing. It folds up into like a single little size of a credit card shape. You can fit a surprising number of cards inside of it. And now my wallet profile is much smaller, and I love these things. And I update them periodically. Like after a couple of years, they do tend to finally start to wear out a little bit. But this is the brand that I like now, and I am a small wallet guy because of it. So they actually have a number of different kinds of slim wallets, but the original Tyvek is the one that I like the most. So that's Slim Fold. That's my recommendation.
Delightful. I am. My next one is a Pilot Varsity Disposable Fountain Pen. I'll post a link to them so you can buy them in packs. I do love a fountain pen in terms of how it writes. I'm sort of a pen snob. I like it. But what I don't like is getting one of the real fountain pens and like having to refill it. I hate that. I hate both the cartridges and the, like, if you order the ink and you use a little squeezy thing to refill your pen. They're much nicer pens that you can get than these pens that I'm going to talk about in terms of like quality and balance and all that. But then you have to deal with the ink, and I just don't want to do that. I'm too lazy. And so I get packs of these Varsity disposable fountain pens. They last, I don't know. The way I write, they last at least a couple months each, maybe longer. I get them in packs of blue, but they sell them in packs that include red and green and I don't know what else, pink, turquoise. And anyway, you can use, they just work like a regular fountain pen, but then when the ink is done, like a good capitalist, you just throw it away. And it's pretty delightful. And I just got like a cup of them, and I just write with them, and they're great. So I heartily recommend Pilot Varsity disposable fountain pens.
Okay. My next recommendation is actually for a cookie company called Milk Jar Cookies.
I like cookies.
Well, okay, so you can order these. They are local to Los Angeles, but you can order them and get them shipped to you nationwide.
Sounds like my Christmas present, Rob.
Well, they make good presents, in fact. I have given these before. And in fact, they have a subscription service where they'll send you a box of cookies every month, which you can either do for 6 or 12 months, and you can get an assortment. The cookies are big. They're big, and they're kind of fat too. So large around with a tall sort of profile, a little bit mounding in the middle, and they do sort of one-off flavors for the month in addition to their sort of standard flavors. And if you get an assortment, they'll often, um, you know, throw in they'll do some of both, like the ones that they're doing, on a short-term basis, as well as some of their old standards. For instance, this month they have a peppermint bark cookie that's very good, actually, and along with and a white chocolate raspberry that's not one of their sort of regular ones. It's like white chocolate chips inside their sort of standard cookie base with a big dollop of raspberry something in the middle of it. I'm particularly, but then they have their standard ones too. They have a banana split cookie, which is kind of fun. It's like a banana infused cookie dough with a strawberry uh, sort of dollop in the middle of the thing with chocolate chips in it, and they're good. They're good cookies, is what I'm saying, and they send them to you in attractive boxes. They make for good gifts. They freeze well. They're soft and pleasantly chewy. Their Rocky Road cookies real good too. They got good stuff. Check them out. Milk Jar Cookies.
Milk jar cookies.
You can get your boxes.
All right, my next one. So I need to celebrate this place a little bit. So I my family and I were supposed to go to Europe over the summer, and we could not go to Europe because COVID and state departments and all of that. It was a bummer. So instead, we went to the mountains of Western North Carolina, which I like been through but never stayed in. So we went to a little town called Sylva Dillsboro, actually, and in downtown Sylva, and actually also in downtown Franklin, North Carolina, there's a brewery. Now, I used to be super into beers and like would go all over the place for them, and then I decided I wanted to, be a healthy human being, and went on keto and did not drink beer for a long time. But I went back this summer. I went to I decided to sort of like let loose a little bit, and we stumbled upon this lovely little brewery in the middle of COVID, but they were socially distant. They did all of the things responsibly. The beers are great, and their merch is great, and they're called Lazy Hiker Brewing. So both Franklin is right on the Appalachian Trail, and Silva's like right along this river, and it's just beautiful. And so I'm recommending Lazy Hiker Brewing at lazyhikerbrewing.com. They have great beers if you're there. They don't ship, so you just got to settle for their merchandise if you're outbound somewhere. They have great merchandise too. I bought a shirt. It's super comfy. Great logo, great art. So lazyhikerbrewing.com. You saved my summer on some level. So hooray.
That sounds wonderful. So the next thing that I'm going to be recommending is the phone cases from the company Urban Armor Gear. I use their iPhone cases, but they also do cases for Android, Samsung, various other products. Also for iPads and tablets. So this is my favorite phone case. They have a very sort of slim profile, but they are exceedingly, exceedingly effective at protecting your phone. They are all set to military drop standards in their drop test standards, um, meaning they provide shock protection at a very, very high level, while at the same time not being bulky. Um, they're lightweight. They're not unattractive, uh, or at least they're not. Well, I like the look out of them actually, but they're actually not especially. What's the word? My brain is seizing up here. They're uh, you know they're not super distinctive one way or another. I tend to like a sort of more minimalist sort of design, so they're unobtrusive, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and really, really good protection for your phone. Can't tell you how many times I have dropped it, my phones over the years using these, and never had a problem with them at all. So Urban Armor Gear, check them out. They're cases for phones. I
Speaking of
like.
phone cases, my next recommendation also a phone case, although this company does several different things. So I drop my phone all the time, and I do need protection. But I'm also a like, as you know, I like to call attention to myself in whatever ways possible, and so having a very attractive phone case is interesting to me. But these folks at carved.com do phone cases. They do wallets. They do jewelry things. They do wireless phone chargers. Carved.com. They're based in Indiana, nice Midwestern homegrown company. They do wood and resin, like artful cases. And you can get the cases kind of like the one you're describing. It's got rubber on the outside, and then they do their wood and rosin thing kind of inset on the back, and it's really attractive. But they also do, and they're the only company that I know that does this, that has a live edge phone case, which means it doesn't have the rubber on the outside. It's just like this nice, smooth background of perfectly fitted wood and resin with a rubber inside. Your phone is protected if it does drop. And they're just gorgeous. And it's like it's beautiful, and I've had them for 2 or 3 phones in a row. I've ordered my next one because I just upgraded to the iPhone 12 or whatever it is. So I had like custom order it. They're building it to spec. I picked the design that I like and the colors that I like, and they carve it out or whatever they do, and then I'm gonna get it in the mail probably this week. And so I just want to recommend and commend the good people of carved.com.
That sounds great. Um, so my next recommendation is actually for a company and their line of various products, and that is Mondo. Mondo, Mondo, mondoshop.com is the website. This is essentially the merchandising line for the Alamo Draft House, part of that company, that family of companies, uh, which rose Alamo Draft House, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, is the very best movie theater chain in the country, in my opinion, where they serve food, drink, and show you movies, but with a very sort of fun film culture, slant kind of film geek aesthetic. They are great fun, lovers of movies, uh, sort of high and low. And Mondo, originally they, I think, just started doing T-shirts and then specialty lines of like limited edition posters, which are always beautiful and amazing posters, but then have branched out slowly into other film products of various kinds, including soundtracks, which they often do on vinyl, and products as varied as puzzles to pins to Just a whole bunch of really cool stuff. Go check out Mondo. They're great. And if you are looking for gifts for film lovers, you are sure to find something there. So check that out.
Delightful. We have a we just 2 years ago, I think, got an Alamo Draft House about an hour from here, up in the Raleigh.
Well, they're
It
great.
makes me excited.
I recommend
It's
them
very
too.
exciting. My next one, and actually my last one, is a coffee place. It is also based in the mountains of Western North Carolina, and it is the best coffee I've had in a long, long time. They're called Summit Coffee. What you need to know about them, I think they're originally based in Boone, North Carolina, but now there's kind of a chain that's expanded. And the location I experienced them in is in the River Arts District of Asheville, North Carolina, which, if you don't know, Asheville is like the place all the hipsters go to live, and all the artists, and then all the people who want to buy from those people. They live in Asheville. And so the association you should be making is that all those people are probably coffee snobs, and so this is the place that they go. And it's a really good. It's just great. They have a great aesthetic. Everything's like this pale green color. You walk in and you feel like you're in a slightly different universe. It's got this like nostalgia thing going on to it. But and actually the last time I was there, granted this is during COVID, but we went on like a Sunday morning. And the line was snaked around the building. It's so popular, socially distance spaced, but it was snaked around the building and through the parking lot. The coffee is really, really good. Summit Coffee. They sell subscriptions. They do sourcing. So every time you go, they do have a base selection of stuff that you can choose from, but then they have more seasonal or selective things. And they usually, if you can hang on, they usually have great sales of like 30 or 40% off a few times during the year. And they're also looking for franchisees. So if you're looking to open a coffee shop, this might be your way to do that. But I just ordered a bunch of coffees, including Honduras Red Honey, Finca San Isidro, a couple others. It's truly, truly delicious.
Oh, that's very cool. Well, my last recommendation for the day is actually an ice cream company called Salt and Straw. And they're interesting. They're not quite nationwide, but their profile has been on the rise. I think that they have plans to grow quite a bit over the years, and you may have seen them before. Perhaps it's something you're familiar with. As a ice cream company, they are out of the upper Northwest. I believe they come out of either Washington State or Oregon. That's sort of where they came from, and have slowly been moving to other areas of the country as well. But you can buy their ice cream online and have it shipped to you. And the thing that's interesting about Salt and Straw is they're very high quality in terms of their ice cream. They try to use locally sourced ingredients and whatnot. So it's good, high quality, premium ice cream. But also they're known for their extremely sometimes, in addition to a sort of core number of sort of normal quote unquote ice cream flavors, they also are very experimental and occasionally do things that are quite surprising.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw they had an olive oil ice cream.
Yeah, and honestly, that's one of their more that's like, as far as their experimental ones go, that's somewhat more tame in comparison to some of the stuff that they do. They do a range of monthly flavors that are new, usually with some seasonal application. Like for the holiday season, they have a spiked eggnog ice cream. So I believe there will be some alcohol in there.
I do like the nog of an egg. I do.
Well, there you go. The title of it is actually Duantas Terramana spiked eggnog, Duanta being a reference to Dwayne the Rock to the Rock,
Hmm.
um, um, who is a co-owner or a one of the owners bought into the company a few years ago. So Dwayne Johnson, the Rock film star and former wrestler and arguably the most popular celebrity on earth, owner of part owner of Salt and Straw, investor in them. Also, they have a and it's his tequila that from his tequila company that they are using for that particular recipe. Also, they have a cocoa and peppermint patties ice cream, which is a chocolate ice cream base with peppermint patties that they have made themselves, mixed in. Um, Gingerbread cookie dough ice cream, and almond brittle with salted ganache. As is the name would imply, Salt and Straw, a lot of their flavor combinations involve sort of salt as a counterpoint, which has become, very popular in the food world over the last few years. Salted caramel / chocolates and stuff. So they're big believers in that. They also have lots of vegan flavors. For instance, the Great Cookie Swap is their holiday flavor right now that involves a whole bunch of different holiday cookies in a vegan ice cream base. And I'll tell you this, I am often sort of skeptical of vegan flavors of ice cream. I take the fairly unenlightened and almost certainly morally and also just on the facts, the basis of fact, like incorrect opinion that like I'll just take the real thing, and if it's bad for me, I won't have it. But I'll dispense with the sort of pretenders that attempt to recreate it while not actually being it. When it comes to food, I tend to take a dim view of that. And so I have this entirely unfair, I admit, hostility sometimes to vegan ice cream flavors or things like that. But I will tell you what, I like Salt and Straw a lot. I think all of their flavors are interesting and good. Well, some of them are strange. I can give you a list of some of those too. But my favorite flavor that they have there is on their classic flavor menu is a vegan flavor, and that is their strawberry and coconut water sherbet. And it is an amazingly good ice cream flavor. It is so good. And the coconut water essentially is the base for that, as opposed to dairy. And it's just excellent. But their classic flavors include sea salt and caramel ribbons, their double fold vanilla, chocolate gooey brownie, honey lavender, freckled mint TCHO chocolate chip, which is a vegan flavor as well, salted malted chocolate chip cookie dough, pear and blue cheese ice cream. And yes, the olive oil ice cream, and a cold brew coffee cashew praline ice cream. Sometimes they get quite strange. Like they have from time to time had a bone marrow cherry ice cream that I've seen during the Halloween season. They had a cricket ice cream with pieces of crickets and mealworms in it.
Protein, high protein.
Yeah, which I did taste, and tasted sweet with a crunchy dimension to it, which was interesting. But they often do like go to the outer edges of what you would expect from. I once got a olive brittle, olive and blue cheese brittle ice cream. No, not blue cheese, goat cheese. Olive and goat cheese. So it was olive brittle and a goat cheese based ice cream, which was good in small quantities, but it became a little overpowering in a large amount. Anyway, check out Salt and Straw. They're lots of fun, and their ice cream is excellent, and you can get it shipped to you.
Sounds like a Christmas present for me as well.
There you go. There you go. There you go. We will, as Jeremy said, link to the various websites for all of these different places, in the show notes here. So check them out because they're good and recommended by us.
Which is the best recommendation.
Yeah, there you go. Because we know what we're talking about in all things. That was sarcastic.
We're professional consumers. That's what I would say.
That's right. Yeah, that's true. And we do have considered taste with regard to the things that we like. Whether it's good taste or bad taste, we know what it is that we enjoy.
For sure.
Yeah. Which brings us to our final topic for discussion here today, or the next topic that we're going to be discussing, that is continuing in our discussion of the play that Jeremy and I are collaborating on. Going through this character questionnaire from NaNoWriMo with regard to our main character, the boy in Falstaff's Son. For those of you who have been following along, we are on question number 15 of this lengthy character questionnaire, where we consider these various things, attributes, questions, thoughts about the character at hand. And so let's pick up there, shall we?
We shall.
With number 15. Special skills / abilities that our character has. What do you think about that?
Skills and abilities. Well, he's a page, so there's a bunch of stuff wrapped up in that. I mean, I don't know if those are special or not, but you have to know how to do stuff like armor people and horses and fight and stuff, rapier, dagger, junk.
Right. So an understanding of various aspects of sort of military gear and whatnot. We do in the scenes that we've written so far mention that he, in terms of special skills and abilities, he is educated to a certain extent. Does in fact have a command of certain foreign languages, which becomes an important story point. In fact, when he is in France, so he speaks a little bit of Latin and Greek in our introduction to that as a sort of reference to the famous line about Shakespeare having
small Latin and less
small
Greek.
Latin, less Greek, but he speaks French fluently, as it happens, which will be very important when he's in France. And Andy is a reader in addition to that. So in this particular time and place in the world, having those could potentially, I suppose, be seen as special skills and abilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's educated.
Fairly unusual.
Yeah. So, there's stuff like that. Maybe he's double jointed too. Or you can do that thing with your eyelids where you can flip them up and really freak people out. I don't know if you've ever seen people who can do that. Maybe he has some interesting physical ability like that. We'll have to see if there's room for us to explore anything like that. Insecurities. Now, this is an important question for this character.
Yeah, the one I keep settling on is he's insecure about his stature, his girth. He's a boy, right? And then we see him like I envision him as like this sort of skinny, person who fills out eventually, but he's really insecure about that in his youth.
Because he's vulnerable.
Yeah, he's maybe underdeveloped. Eventually, he becomes like a normal person, but that he's compensating for that on some level. He's like physically like a little underprivileged, so he compensates that with his brain work, his reading, all of the things you just mentioned. I think I think the story of this play is his insecurity about his family.
Yeah,
he's literally insecure there. I think that's the central part, right? Yeah.
Yeah, insecure about his parentage. I mean, he's been told a story that his parents were, in some distant way, sort of, gentry. uh, on their way to nobility in some way, but that he comes from a good family, uh, but that they are dead, and so and not been told much about them uh, by his adopted sort of distant cousins who raised him. Again, a sort of good noble family, but not much has been told to him. Reason being that again, the actual truth of his parentage, being the son of John Falstaff and a prostitute, is the kind of thing that people don't, that's better kept from him, honestly, and that not many people need to know. And he is insecure about that. He doesn't know them well. I think he wishes that he did. And then when he gets put into a position where a number of people do know the truth of where he comes from and he doesn't, I think that, at least in one case in particular, is going to get used against him in a way that I think is going to play on those insecurities in important ways. So, and then as he gets older and does know the truth about, who his father and mother were, I think that insecurity is also going to play into his relationship with Henry. So I think that's an important question here. Quirks or eccentricities?
Yeah, this goes back to something we've talked about now as we've worked through the questionnaire, which is I would love to find some places where the behavioral and linguistic DNA of Falstaff and Henry come out in his behavior. So I don't know what that is. Is it witticisms or is it I don't know. Turns of phrase, sharp-wittedness, that kind of thing.
Yeah. It occurs to me, is there something about the way that he sleeps that's specific and strange? A kid who has not had, as a page to Falstaff, there's a degree to which he's got to sleep where he can, and also then later as a soldier. I wonder if there's something wrapped up in that. If he has some specific habit or something, some ritual that he has to observe to give himself some degree of stability when there isn't any. Otherwise, that might be fun to play with. Can come out a little later. Temperament. Is he easygoing? Is he easily angered?
Well, I think go ahead. You first.
Well, no, what I was going to say is, I think particularly as a young person, he's very eager to please. Right?
That's what we see, I think, right? Yeah, in the text.
Yeah, very keen, to do a good job, and has a certain guilelessness that I think just really makes him want to do a good job. So that's him as a child, and I think that impulse may exist within him, as we follow him into an older person, but also there may be countervailing or, things in response to that as he gets older too. I think he will change over time.
Yeah, and this is where I see some of that change following the examples before him, which would be Falstaff and Henry, who I think it is safe to say can access rage.
Yeah.
Falstaff, the rage comes from a different place. I mean, it's not as Falstaff's rage is sort of circumstantial, and I think Hal's rage is embedded. But I think exploring how that comes out is a really important feature of what we got to do.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, I think your insight into Hal and Falstaff, the way that anger emerges with the two of them, Hal, I think, is superficially easygoing. That's sort of his persona, particularly in well, the first couple of plays, but then when he lashes out in anger, it's sharp and it's mean, and it's sometimes very surprising. Um, and Henry V, it's interesting because he's not, being a jokey, friendly, guy around town, but you do see some of that coming out there too, specifically, in the way that he responds to, what's their names, the ones he executes. What's his name? Early on in the play. You know who I'm talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also his response to the Dauphin. Uh,
And the
there's
scene with
this.
Kate. I mean, he's lighter there too, but he
Well,
can.
no, he's light there, but then like in those other scenes, he's mean, like when he gets
Yeah.
angry, right?
Yeah.
And in Henry IV, 1 and 2, that kind of comes out like a knife, occasionally. It's like he's real pleasant. Then all of a sudden, it's like, I need to remind these people who I am. You know what I mean? And you see him sort of navigating that a little bit, or sometimes being caught off balance before, snaking out and being ugly. He feels much more, it seems like, willing to show that nakedly in Henry V, and is much more comfortable with, well, not that he's ever really uncomfortable with being a jerk when he feels like being a jerk. Um, but it's a little more balanced in Henry V. Anyway, his like public face is generally, it's like, I'm a nice guy, I'm appealing, I'm friendly, but don't cross me or I will smash you. Whereas Falstaff is, sort of naked bluster at all times,
Mm-hmm.
and his anger um, is, comes out much more readily, but also doesn't seem to penetrate quite as far to his core, right? And so, how does all of this affect the boy? I think that's part of what we have to really figure out here. Um, I think he's his own person, but he is, strung between these two authority figures who have embedded in him, at least made him have to think about this. And maybe he finds his own way, but that'll be an interesting question. Negative traits.
Yeah, this goes back to I'm sure he has some. I mean, I'm imagining a sort of balanced look at this. The alcohol piece is the one that I'm sort of interested in, whether he has a negative relationship to alcohol, which I read as the Falstaff and Hal problem, like with a contemporary lens. Like if we were looking at it today, they both have alcohol problems, and I'm interested to see whether that colors him in any way. What do you think?
I think that, yeah, that is important. We do need to build some real character flaws into him. My thought is, with the alcohol question is a good one, or a good place to look at that. I think that as a young person, he's going to be have a real sort of negative. It's like, I no ale for me, thank you. Is maybe where he comes from when he's a boy, and then at some point, he will find that he has a real taste for it. And I think when he is drunk, that is where he accesses whatever Falstaffian sort of elements might exist in his personality. And I think that those are probably a source of great shame for him. That on one hand, I think he does love Falstaff, but also is deeply embarrassed by him. And it comes back to that question of, his insecurities about his parentage, finding out that Falstaff is his father. This character for whom he does have respect and affection, before he finds that out definitively. But also, I think would be slightly mortified to find out that he's actually his father.
Hmm.
And when he does finally start drinking, and that those sort of Falstaffian qualities start to emerge, I think that they're probably a source of real um, self-loathing for him. And so, and that he may overcorrect in his response to that.
Well, and you mentioned the word shame, and I think that's the other piece here is that he is, because of those insecurities about his parentage, as that comes to light. I mean, that's the in my mind is the overriding thing for the middle part of this story, is sort of what that is, what that shame is, and what it means for him, and how he does or doesn't overcome it.
Which actually leads into nicely into this question: things that upset him or her. What are things that upset him?
Well,
Um,
I see this. So I think the big upset things, um, the things that happen later in the story and later in his life are the things we've been talking about. As a young person into adolescence, um, I see him in the Henry plays as uh, someone who's concerned with protocol to some degree. I mean, I think that's your gig as a page, is like, this is how it's supposed to be, and then you got Falstaff in your life. It's taking that rule book and then applying it to the chaotic mass that character
mhm.
is, and so I could see his sort of just so-ness running into the reality of how the real world works, um, and seeing some stuff there, you know.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that, when you talk about protocol and, his sort of inclination towards that intersecting with the real world, I think that there's also a real sense of like being honorable is important to him. Uh, and how does that, but then also contextualizing that with having been the servant of, and then he comes to find out the son of this man who is nakedly dishonorable, right? And I think reconciling those two twin impulses to have charity and love for flawed human people with belief that honor is important, I think could come out in interesting ways. Which is to say that, like, you know, I think that his embarrassment a little bit about Falstaff and his mother probably in keep him trying to be an honorable person and not his father, but that he also feels a great deal of sympathy for them. That it has also embedded with him a charitable instinct toward
Mm.
flawed people. And I think that that's going to come, those twin impulses are going to come together in a real anger towards Henry late in the play. It'll be the source of a real source of conflict for them when he comes to the conclusion, or at least is voicing this conclusion that he has come to at some point, that Henry behaved in a dishonorable manner towards his father. That
Mm-hmm.
as embarrassing as Falstaff was, and he keenly feels that what Henry did to him was really unforgivable betrayal and a dishonorable thing. And I think that the nexus of those sort of those seemingly incompatible impulses are going to come together in an interesting way there. Well, we've gone through another few questions. I think we may want to leave it there for the moment.
We did it.
We did it indeed.
We're going to do it again sometime soon.
Mm-hmm.
Meantime, thank you for joining us out there in the universe. As always, if you wish to contact us, you can do so at ours, that's HOURS, at sweetteashakespeare.com. We'd be happy to listen to what you have to say. We might even share it, or you can put something in the comments on all of the various platforms upon which we appear. Otherwise, thanks for being here, and until next time, ta-ta for now.
We'll see you later.